I know, it got really quiet. All of a sudden you sit down and.
Getting ready for the gavel again.
Well, my microphone will wreck that. Just you guys wait. Never fails.
Right?
Uh,
All right, hang on just 1 second. I know it's 6 o'clock. All right, 6 o'clock, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us for the Monday, March 3rd, 2025 City Council meeting. We will begin with approving or amending the agenda. Is there any changes to the agenda anybody'd like to make tonight?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I need to pull up, I'm sorry, I'm behind. I gotta find my packet. I'd like to pull a consent agenda item.
Okay,
It is the. I
Three,
can't
four?
talk and do things at the same time. Yes, thank you. Can you pull 3-4, please, and put it down in general business?
that'll be 7.7. Okay. If there's no other changes, I would take a motion to approve the agenda.
Make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Margaret, second by Zanto. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Sheriff's report. Good evening, Deputy Strack.
Three full pages of calls, traffic. You guys better watch out because we're on a hunt. Lots of traffic going on right now with the nice warm weather. There's cars flying around like crazy, so keep an eye out because we're stopping them. And then today there has been, I don't know, probably a dozen fire calls, so grass fires. So it's really dry out. So just everybody be careful if you're burning stuff. The wind's caught a couple of yards today, so both on the east and west side. Other than that, really nothing major that stands out. Obviously, you're well aware of the crash on Eagle Creek that occurred. That's kind of the not the normal for around here, obviously. Couple burglaries. Other than that, really just medicals, your alarm calls. You'll see on the report there is a drug court. So we do have a person that's on probation. Instead of regular probation, we have a drug court probation where we actually monitor them and we do check-ins. They have a curfew at night versus just a regular probation. So you'll see that probably a couple times a week. We're stopping out to make sure that that person is doing what they're supposed to be doing. So there's 5 levels on drug court, just so you're aware. So that will be a long haul. You'll see that for a while. So any other questions other than just the regular general report?
Council members, any questions for Deputy Strack? Bill, looks like no.
No.
Sure.
Okay.
It's your
Who pays
time.
for the drug court, like, for you guys to go out there 5 times, is that like, how is that covered? Like, do taxpayers have to pay for that?
It's part of probation. So they get put on probation, and instead of just allowing them to be on probation, not monitored or being monitored where they have to go into the courthouse and check in, it's a higher level. So we're going out and doing it. Obviously you're paying our tax dollars anyways, so we're going out just making sure that they're abiding by it. They're not home at a curfew. We send a report up to the judge and the attorney's office, and then they'll violate them, and then they go back to jail or prison.
Okay,
So-
so this isn't like a novel experiment that we're doing this.
No, we've had drug court for a long time. It's just, you haven't probably ever seen anybody in Credit River being on drug court.
Okay,
Shakopee, Prairie Lake, and Savage have a lot just because of the bigger cities. But we've seen more success in the drug court than we have just regular probation because they're being monitored.
Yeah.
So I think they're actually they're looking at creating like drug court AA kind of after they're off of it to keep them straight and narrow instead of trying to fall off the wagon. So it's a long haul system. To me, it's cheaper than the prison system. So
Okay,
just to monitor them and keep them on track.
thank you.
And there's certain levels, so you can't have like a domestic assault call, or, they're not gonna go on to that. A lot of it's drugs, a lot of it's assault, not assaults, but like traffic violations where they're just continuing. So they'll get put into that. A lot of times it's the judge that decides who gets to go in on it. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Perfect. Anybody else? Any questions for Deputy Strat? Awesome. Jeff, we appreciate it.
Yep.
Be safe out there.
Yep.
Perfect. We'll move to consent agenda. Those items on the council agenda which are considered routine or non-controversial are included as part of the consent agenda. Unless a council member specifically requested an item on the consent agenda be removed and considered separately, items on the consent agenda are considered under one motion, a second, and a vote. Any item removed from consent agenda shall be placed at the end of general business. Tonight on the consent agenda, we've got 3.1, approve the minutes of the February 18th, 2025 city council meeting. 3.2, approve the payment of claims and transfer requests as presented. And 3.3, approve the general transfer request to the developer escrow for wetland delineation. Is there any items that any council member would like to remove and consider separately in consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to approve consent agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you,
Second.
Leroy. A motion by Schomer, second by Soderbach. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Open forum. The public forum is intended to afford the public an opportunity to address concerns to the council. The public forum will be no longer than 30 minutes in length, and each presenter will have no more than 5 minutes to speak. Topics of discussion are restricted to local governmental topics rather than private or political agendas. The council may discuss but will not take formal action on public forum presentations. We said nobody signed up to speak for open forum tonight. Is there anybody who'd like to speak in open forum tonight? Seeing none, we will close open forum and we'll move to general business. General business 7.1, consider ordinance 2025-04, amending the city zoning code pertaining to cannabis and hemp businesses and approve summary resolution 2025-10. Planner Claire, are you gonna take this one?
I will start it off. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight for your consideration is the cannabis ordinance that the city staff has been working on and was heard for public hearing at the Planning Commission's February meeting. Some discussion that no members of the public came forward at that public hearing, nor did they send anything to staff prior to that meeting, and I don't think we've had anything post-meeting. There was a lot of discussion though and good questions from the Planning Commission members, particularly as mentioned in my staff report, clarifying some of the cannabis related definitions, how the proposed buffers would apply since the language is specific to park features and not parks in general, and how the city would fund those required compliance checks since we opted to not have Scott County do that so that we could maintain control of the one cannabis business rather than potentially have more than that if Scott County would have done the licensing and regulation for that. So that was the main discussion. There was some as well for 3 of the different uses on your use chart for the zoning component of this ordinance for this evening. Cannabis testing, lower potency hemp edible manufacturer, as well as cultivation business indoor. For that public hearing, those were initially as an interim use permit in the commercial district. After discussions with staff and some concerns that were brought up in that meeting, we did move those to the industrial district for tonight's consideration of the ordinance. Initially, a lot of that, when we were kind of pinpointing the best districts for those uses, we tried to put what we thought were heavier. Obviously, after discussion, more were thought to be heavy. Another analysis that I took a look at was your zoning map. What had more property available around it that could be rezoned to industrial versus commercial, that you might see those types of requests come through. It's pretty 50-50. I mean, your industrial parcels are a little bit larger in acreage, so there's some more parcels around there that would prevent spot zoning to come through if somebody did want to rezone to industrial for this type of use. But that's kind of what initially went in when it went to the Planning Commission. But yeah, after that meeting, staff did discuss and we've updated it to include those 3 uses in the industrial district. And they are all interim use permit for every single use, and the cultivation outdoor is interim use for 10 or more acres, which aligns with the current agriculture buildings within your use chart and zoning district. So that's the main overview of what the planning commission discussed and the ordinance highlights in relation to the zoning side of this. This ordinance does have some other elements to it, and I'll hand that off to Joe, who is with us tonight from Canadian Creative, and because Pete was unable to make it.
Perfect. Joe, thank you for being here tonight again. I know you were at our planning commission meeting here a week or so ago, and appreciate you coming back here filling in for Pete tonight. Anything additional to add to Claire's report tonight?
The only additions that I'll just briefly go over, Claire's mainly talked about section 2. Section 1 of the ordinance is more the administrative side. Those are the things city staff will be doing related to applications that come in for zoning certification, as well as the retail registration process, which is outlined in this ordinance. We also include in both sections, so there's no confusion, the reference to and explanation of the buffers that are being adopted. And those buffers are the maximum allowed under the statute. That's what's been drafted here in Credit River. So that's the sort of primary overview of the first part. I will stand for any questions on that. I know that you all have had extensive discussions about this ordinance, and so I'm happy to fill in any gaps, but that is the extent of my comments.
Perfect, thank you. Any other staff comments before I ask for questions from council?
No.
No? Well, you're not staff.
Council.
Now I'm gonna ask for council
Okay.
discussion. Does anybody have any comments? Bill?
I have 2 unless Leroy wants to go.
No, go ahead.
I have 2. Number 1, I just want the residents to know that the ordinance that we're approving tonight does not have all the regulations that are listed in the act. And that our ordinance will, whenever we do an application, we'll make sure that they have to follow the rules or follow the law. So for example, if you have an outdoor cultivation area, you have to have a fence and it has to be a certain type. That's not, you won't see that in our ordinance, but it's in the act. And I asked Peter this, and Joe, you probably answered, that we don't have to have all those details, because the act is like 131 pages long and our ordinance is like 6. So I'm comfortable with that. And then the other thing, Joe, I have a question on. So they haven't approved the final rules yet. Is there any benefit for the city to hold off or table our ordinance until the final rules are published and in effect, just in case they make changes, or don't you think there'll be any changes?
That's a good question. I think that we can anticipate that there will be revisions to the administrative rules, but my recommendation generally has not been to delay implementing the city ordinance. And the reason for that is I would rather advise that you have something in place to ensure that when the rules become effective, businesses can start the process. And my recommendation would be to have something in place that regulates where businesses can go, what standards apply, and what processes will apply, and then amend if necessary based on those.
Okay,
That's just my.
well, I listen to lawyers, so
Well,
got it.
there are many jokes on that, but I won't say anything.
I just don't want to do something and then have to amend it and pay your fees, and of course pay Claire's fees. Do it again, and we may have to have another public hearing if it changes. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Nothing, Jay?
How does this affect neighboring property on the buffers?
I'm not sure. I understand the question.
What, how does this ordinance affect neighboring property owners as written? Beyond, should we have additional considerations in for the zoning of the use, et cetera? I know we haven't done, we talked earlier about putting it as an interim, but do we have a process to protect neighbors from having this, desire, not understand?
I actually defer to Claire on the interim use consideration.
Yeah, I'll hop in here. We don't have those written here. We certainly could. I have seen some cities that have put in some additional fencing regulations on top of what's already in the state law, or water quality. That's a big thing with some of these law. I'm thinking more on the outdoor cultivation use, the lighting, that has to be downcast, it has to be so many feet from the neighboring property line, et cetera. Now, that's also something that we already have in our basic review standards when we look at interim or conditional use permits, that we have to consider the surrounding neighborhood. Yeah, that this parcel might not need as much of this because the residential homes are, let's say, 700 feet from where this is gonna be, but the next application we make it might be 250 feet. So it's gonna look like a different permit because the property's looked at on its own individual basis. Now that does rely heavily on staff and that permit to, make sure that those considerations are coming into play, but I think that's something that we know to look for and is on top of our mind, as well as remainder of staff when we look through these permits on any use at this time that requires conditional or interim.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it's not currently built into the code, but if that is a direction the council could go, it is something we could add in, or we could say, this isn't working, let's add it. I mean, I wouldn't want to be reactive since, like
Right.
Councilmember
We
Margaret
don't
said,
do
we're
that.
already working on this now.
Is there anything that you would add to it to consider those things, or is there a paragraph, or is there, would we tie in other ordinances that we have and just mention them, or, so that, again, like maybe if staff's going through an application and approval process, that they're not
Mhm.
missing another ordinance that covers
Mhm.
something with that as well, and so that it doesn't come as a surprise to a person that's applying for it.
Sure, we certainly could add language that references the section that has all the application requirements and review of an interim use permit. I mean, it wouldn't take, I don't know if that's common in other parts of the code, but this is new for everybody, every city, so if we want to reference that, I don't see, I mean, I'm sure there's a spot we could insert that
Yeah,
here.
I mean, what's new is that, we're about to approve something to govern a
Right.
process that our own state governing authority hasn't completed
Right,
the regulations on in the state. So it's, it's kind of, we want to make sure that we're covered on being able to add things, but also, I don't know, maybe we need to look forward to that, so that, we don't wind up with something applied for in an area that may or may not become, or maybe looking at retail or industrial at some point, or, that we are at least covering ourselves so that we don't wind up just getting sued for saying no.
sure. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Joe. I will say there is definitely, and for conditional and interim use permits for any use, there is a level of how much a city can limit, and that is
Correct.
back to, I'm sure many lawsuits, but in my planning law class that I took, we learned about several of those. There has to be the right nexus of what the city can impose, probably based on what's already in your kind of outlined district standards and performance standards versus, over conditioning something.
So that part of that question was kind of directed at what do we have currently? that,
Right.
That we can fall back on.
I will.
Or
pull it
do we need to do some updates to some of the ordinances that we have that surround us?
And it's possible that this is integral to the discussion that we've kind of floated about interim uses in general and your use chart citywide,
Right.
and versus conditional and interim, as we've seen some unique proposals come through, or just general discussions that haven't jumped into applications yet when it comes to interim use permits. So this could piggyback on all of that, probably.
Right, and that's one of the reasons I'm bringing it up,
Yeah.
and asking about it, because if we approve this, then I'm also asking you to maybe give us some advice as to what, what's missing
Sure.
in our whole library, what we have to do, so that we don't wind up unpleasantly surprised.
Right, and I'm pulling up the interim use standards right now for this discussion.
certainly maybe one of those things, as Claire indicated, that it's more probably likely on the discussion of going through the table, 20-4, what should be interim, what shouldn't be, and then maybe at that time updating the performance standards.
Yeah.
At the same time, so that it encompasses everything, not just,
Right.
if you put it in this ordinance, it covers this ordinance and that's it, right?
Correct.
If you put it in the performance standards, then it covers all uses.
Which is a good idea, but the other side of it is, can we at least look at what we have to figure out, are we missing something? And the other thing is making sure that this is liquid enough so that when the state kind of figures out the rest of its legislation on how to govern this thing.
Sure.
And the rules, we can at least adapt those quickly.
Sure. So currently in your criteria for granting interim use permits, you have 6 findings that the ordinance requires you to make. One is that the use will not create a burden on public facilities or utilities, which are or are proposed to serve the area. The use will be compatible and separated by a sufficient distance, screened from adjacent agricultural or residential land uses, so that there will be no deterrence to that use or development of adjacent land and uses. If improvements are made, they must be designed and constructed so that they are not unsightly in appearance to the extent that it will hinder the orderly, harmonious development of the district wherein proposed. That's a little up for your own interpretation. I don't know if that's super solid, but and then it also says adequate measures have been taken to provide ingress and egress, so designed to minimize traffic congestions, provide adequate access to public roads, and provide on-site parking. Adequate water supply, individual sewage treatment system, erosion control, stormwater management are provided with applicable standards. So that would be probably back to your county and your state standards for a lot of the stormwater management, et cetera. And then the final one is that all buildings and structures meet intent of the state building code and fire codes. So that's the current findings of fact that we would have to make as a recommendation to staff, and then in your resolution for approval or denial for any interim use application that comes through the city at this time. So it's not so specific as you have to have a fence that's so many feet away, or that all lighting has to be downcast. But again, that's a very common, I'm picking on lighting because that does get a lot of neighbor complaints, especially if, let's say, an indoor cultivation thing came through and it's next to an agricultural use that has a home on it. Well, downcast lighting is the only way. They need it for security. That's required in the OCM law, but they also, we don't want it pointing at anybody's home or in the right of way, in the way of, anybody that is traveling or on their own property. So that would be a condition that would not likely cause issue, be an over-conditioned condition, I guess is where I'm
about,
getting at.
Noxious and offensive odors. Control, do we have?
Is there
I think we
anything? I don't
addressed that in our nuisance ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the odor control is a hot topic around cultivation and manufacturing in particular. Yes. And the state rules as they're currently available is one of the only areas in which the city could adopt a separate ordinance that would absolutely govern on sort of not odoriferous problems. The issue, one of the issues with, I don't know, how am I say it? What I've been saying respectfully is that the state processes are all out of sync. And one of the other processes that is not synced up is, so we're dealing with the OCM rules. There's currently an OCM licensing period, and there's also a Minnesota Pollution Control Agency rule on odor that is being considered and not final. So, cities have adopted different odor ordinances that apply generally. And that's also generally been my advice to as sort of Claire is alluding to. There are already standards for review that generally apply to interim uses, and then having an odor ordinance would generally apply within the city. And so it's one of those.
So are we lacking an ordinance to cover that right now that we should consider putting in place if we go forward with this?
That is something that we can consider. I have not reviewed the odor, the public nuisance portion of the code, but it is something that we can adopt separately. In the future.
Okay, one of the other problems with, they're just mostly retail facilities, et cetera, is security. You know, yeah, preventing things. Do we have, I don't know, I haven't really looked at the state's rules for how they have that. But have they, do we have some means of, in our interim use permit and everything else that we're granting for that, to at least make sure that they're building a secure facility that isn't an attraction to burglary or any of these other issues as well?
So I'll say that there are significant performance standards related to security in the rules that address. You have to have submitted a security plan that has to include an X number of cameras and lighting, and there's a security auditing feature, and you have to include response times to public, to police. And so generally when I've been discussing these, if a city were to include something from a sort of 10,000 foot level, I've often advised, when you're thinking about what things to include on a cannabis business, it's less about, you want to stick more towards the zoning and less towards the internal operations. But if there are kind of, and I'm saying internal operations in quotes, we want to make sure that they don't conflict with those rules, which are again currently still being potentially revised. And so I think if there were gaps, there's something that we could potentially consider. But right now, I'm not sure we know what those gaps might be.
Another, just kind of moving right along on the security side, I mean, are we going to be finding ourselves having additional costs with our contract? Sheriff, deputies, et cetera, and is there a way to determine what, if any, additional costs the city may bear to make sure and document it so that we could actually put it into a permit fee, et cetera, so that it's throwing out something, saying, wow, we need $1,000 more a month, or is there a way, do we have any anticipation of having any more responsibilities for this to actually protect it? And if so, is there a way to document or figure out the cost? And should we then add additional fees that the taxpayers aren't bearing?
That's a good question. The permit fees that the city is allowed to charge to a retail business are capped by state law. And so you wouldn't be able to increase the fee to offset increased costs. The city would also sort of on the other, I think I'm not even gonna call it a baby carrot, is that the city will, if a cannabis business locates within the city, will be entitled to what's called local government cannabis aid based on the number of cannabis businesses in the city.
Okay.
And that money comes from the state through the 10% tax. They take the 10% tax. 1% is then split. So 1/2 of the percent is split amongst all of the cities based on the number of businesses within the jurisdiction. So the new revenue that would be coming into the city would be
Is meant to offset that.
yeah, and the permit fees and then the aid are intended to offset that. But then if there are sort of repeat nuisance calls, frequent flyers, there are other ordinances that could potentially apply to a repeat offender.
Which then goes in against the interim use permit. Right.
If they are not meeting the conditions of the permit, yes, that would then come back. It could be used as part of
Would we have conditions permits, or would that be developed in an interim use permit as we develop that?
I think it would be developed into the interim use permit based on the application that's received when you're looking at it.
I have no further questions.
Okay, anything else? Hearing none, if everybody's comfortable with ordinance 2025-04, I take a motion to approve that, as well as approving 2025-0 or 2025-10, which would be to approve the summary resolution for publication.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Jay.
I'll second.
Thank you, Abe. Motion by Sonderbach, second by Santo. All in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Moving on to 2, possible decision about the administrator hiring process. Eric, I don't know if you had anything to kick us off on that one, or
Sure, just what I provided in your packet were two things. One, a resolution, where you folks would, potentially name a potential candidate. I did provide a paragraph there, for a secondary candidate, in the event that, the first one could not be found a balance or an agreement with. The hope there is that, well, my personal opinion is I think you have some good candidates. Move forward with it, hopefully one of them, and it's always hard to disappoint somebody else, we could put a lot of work into it. And then secondly, assuming you folks, can find somebody that, can, I did put in your packet a draft, employment agreement that, the resolution will then enable the city attorney and the city administrator to enter into some level of negotiation with that candidate. With these terms as stated, but there are some blanks and some highlighted portions I'd like to share with you. Of what the course you want to have that conversation with the mayor.
sure. Well, why don't we go through the employment agreement first?
Sure.
And cover those
So on
pieces.
page 35 of your packet, obviously the salary is something that is the biggest question the council had in the past, seeing some stuff from data from Councilmember Zanto. What are some of those averages? Your advertisement for the position was between 116 and 145. You have other staffer at $122,000 per year as your finance director. Your regional averages, if I could paraphrase from Councilmember Zanto's work, was in the neighborhood of $140,000 to $145,000 a year. So you're kind of narrow in where those sweet spots are, and I would argue where you want that person to land, and certainly make the best offer you can, is what I would encourage. So that's gonna take some noodling around, I think, on your folks' part. And maybe that's dependent on the individual. That's hard to say. But other than that, under the pension plan, item number 2 it's pretty standard that it's a para, it's a split share. Some cities do pay for the employee's share of the pension. Some do, some don't. In this case, I did offer a language that said, no, you're not, but after 2 years, assuming they're still with you, which would be great to keep them. And it's an incentive for them to stay longer potentially. So nothing that would start soon, but a 24-month of continuous employment. On the PTO piece, substantive change from what you saw in the past was you're bringing in staff that, they're professional, they have careers and families and this and that, and invariably responsibilities and burdens like we all do. And so they're probably gonna have an expectation of, hey, I'm gonna have some vacation time accrued. So I'm offering, or I put it in the packet that they would have 80 hours of vacation time in a bank. In the event the relationship fractures, they would not be eligible for that to be paid out, but it's there for them to use and consistent with your policy. So they got a vacation plan, they got a sick leave, they're walking in with the bank of some capacity. I'm not aware that was in your previous report. On page 8, I'm sorry, page 36, section 8, I did tweak a couple things. The most important one I did eliminate was an ICMA membership and the conference costs from being an automatic, but to being something to come back to you. Maybe more of a, what I've seen in the field is, those costs are becoming more and more, well, they're just becoming expensive like everything. But what those benefits are from the ICMA aren't as clear as what they get from the state. And so if that person you hire maybe wants to go or can define it for you folks as a clear need, well, just make them bring that back to you versus it being an automatic. Whereas the rest of them essentially are, which is important. That said, I would encourage, I did write in one of the changes I did not highlight it, I apologize, was encouraging them to participate and have you folks cover those costs for being part of Minnesota Planning Association review. Much of what they do on a daily basis relates to planning. So, and they're gonna take a lot of questions all the time. If they're not familiar with 1599, if they're not familiar with these rules, that change every year versus city manager type stuff. I think they get a better exposure. That's just my opinion, but I think it's well worth the investment of time and money.
Okay.
And the rest relates to the league and some other things that those are really good resources for them. And it's also a good professional outreach to them. That's useful. Number 14, in terms of hours of work. I think depending on each candidate, it's always a different, but is our world changing? And you don't want this to be a remote position by any stretch of the word. You want them butt in seat here, but to give them some level of flexibility might be something to consider. So 8 hours a week is what I noted in here. And again, all these things can be changed and what have you. So I think I've caught all of the things I thought would be worth mentioning. Otherwise, I tried to follow your past format. And if you come to a decision on a candidate, we would work with Peter Michael to get this cleaned up. And it's all dependent on the passage of a final background check. So you have that hurdle to deal with. So those are those.
Okay, well, let's pause there for council comment. Is there any comment on the employment agreement piece and the changes that Eric had proposed?
Yeah, there's a couple spots, like just, for example, under 17, termination of benefits. Get a couple in there. It's employee, I think second sentence. Employer agrees to pay employee at the time of receipt of her last paycheck.
Oh, sure. Okay.
I think we should probably go through and make sure that we've
It's
proofed the document for any
Hmm.
language like that.
Specific to a person?
Yeah, specific to a person or gender.
I thought I caught them all, but I messed up.
There was a couple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Okay. Do you have that?
No,
That's
that was
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have some.
Bill?
So I'm gonna go back in the order that you had, Eric. Section 2 pension plan is it common? I'm used to vesting. Is it common to we pay 20% the first year, 40%, 60%, 80%, 100%?
Not in para.
Not in para? Okay. So I'm good with 24 months if that's what the market says we do. The PTO thing, this is what I got upset with on the last contract. So it's reflected in number 5. I'm okay with doing the advanced PTO. We need something. Do we add something where the city administrator has to track their hours and give it to the mayor or give it to Lucas? So we have that because there was a discrepancy, in my opinion, between the hours that were tracked and the hours that were taken. Because we don't have a
Time
time
clock.
card.
So PTO hours is what you'd like to see?
Yes, I
track.
mean, I went back to the city administrators weekly updates and counted all the days that former person was on vacation. And then compared it to the number of hours they asked to get paid. And they didn't reconcile with me. So I just want to make sure that we track hours. If we're gonna pay.
The position is exempt,
If
right?
we're-
So,
Right,
so it's an exempt position, so you.
but it impacts the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is another section of the contract, which is the termination benefits. And let's hope we never have to deal with it, the termination benefits, but I gotta find where this is. I want to make sure that
17.
The separation, 17, so the separation, this is still 6 months, it is. I want to make sure that we say 6 months less any accrued PTO that we pay out. Because we could, it says, where's that sentence, Chris, where it says that this is all we are obligated to pay? So it says, then employers shall have no obligation to pay the terminate.
So,
There used to be a sentence in here that says, this is the entire separation payment. Do I see that in here?
there's the last sentence, employee reference here shall be paid in a lump sum after return of employers.
Gosh, I don't even see
Yeah,
that
so-
sentence
so
anymore.
let me understand, so.
We-
Okay, what's
I thought when the person left, all we were owed, all that person was owed was 6 months. But then there was another ask, no, you owe me all this PTO that I
Well,
never took.
So PTO is earned. I mean, it's an accrued benefit. You can't take it away. There's no way to offset, you can't. If the
That's
lang-
fine.
Right, so if you wanted this language, say 6 months minus accrued PTO as
Yes.
its value, I think you could state that,
I-
but you can't. So basically then just say.
That's what I want to
5
state.
months. To be fair, then just say
No,
5
why can't we just say 6 months? Less any accrued PTO paid, because that way you get the employee, you want the employee to take PTO.
Correct,
I mean,
you do,
you want them to take it. You don't want them to bank it.
correct.
I don't even know if we have banking allowed.
We do have a bank, we do have a minimum
Mhm.
bank, maximum banking
Maximum banking.
allowance. So and it would take a while for them to get to any kind of, I see what you're saying. Just think how we write
So-
that.
So less any accrued PTO paid, 6 months salary, less any PTO paid,
Less accrued,
PTO owed
PTO
to employer, to employee,
outstanding unpaid PTO.
earned
or
but
something.
unpaid, earned but unpaid PTO.
Gotcha, I follow you.
The only thing be careful of is what does our HR policy manual state
Well, run it by
regarding
Rachel.
PTO, right?
Right,
That's what we need to,
I think that's
it has to be
already in.
consistent, right? So we can't have something in this agreement that's not consistent with what our personnel policy is.
But this is an employment contract, so we can have things that are inconsistent with the,
It's true.
But there is a statement here that says it shall, PTO is specifically addressed as pursuant to the city's employment and personnel policies as amended.
and that's related to accruing it.
It is. I could see that being,
We're gonna pay it. We're gonna accrue for it. We're gonna pay unpaid, unearned PTO or
Earned.
earned, but
earned, but
unpaid.
unrecognized.
We're gonna pay all that stuff. It's just. So
I get what you're saying, Councilman Marker, 100%.
it wasn't insignificant dollars.
No,
And
I mean, you want to encourage people to take their PTO, I mean, for vacation and mental health and all those things, but you can't force it.
Yeah.
You know, so. I think maybe there's a middle ground here. Let's noodle around on the language, but I see what you're saying.
I think 6 months is very generous. And we're asking, they're still gonna get 6 months.
Yeah.
It's just gonna be
Yeah,
6 months less any
yeah,
earned but
I
unpaid.
get you. I follow you. I'm, if the rest of the council is comfortable with that and we'll work out the language with the city attorney, it's not gonna be a huge difference in the first few years of a contract. But as time goes on.
It
you
was
want-
significant. In 1 year, it was $10,000 roughly.
Well, remember why you're coming into a separation. There's two sides of that tail.
Right.
So somebody accruing PTO, they're entitled to those things, and if.
I know, it's just that I come back that the tracking wasn't done, so we need two things. We need to make sure that it's tracked somehow. Because we're gonna pay it out we may pay it out someday.
To track their PTO, that's a fair ask.
Yeah.
For them to.
It's probably something that needs to be in the personnel policy more so than
Than in the contract.
one agreement,
Because you can
right?
refer
But-
to it.
But you can't force them to take it. I mean,
No.
it comes to a point if there's a cap in the policy, either they use it or lose it. So there's
Mhm.
that.
Lower the cap.
Well,
We'd have to look at the personnel policy to
Right.
see what that detail is. That's a different different piece to update than this one.
Ask them to fill out a time card or this or that, it's.
I don't know if it needs to be a time card, but it's
But remember, they're exempt.
Well, you really can't do it with an exempt employee
No.
either.
no, it's just more of a, hey, I'm taking a PTO this day, like, whether it be a calendar invite or just so that you have some sort of.
There,
I totally get what you're saying.
there is a sentence missing in here too, that what used to be. in
Well,
here.
just-
It used to say, this is everything we're gonna pay.
Well,
as
there's
part of the
also,
sep-
but remember, there was also a separation agreement too, that was, you also had, there was this, you also had a separation agreement.
Okay.
So you're probably thinking of a line that was in the separation.
If we tweaked it, if I,
Boy,
again, I try to call out the major changes here, if there's something I've cleaned up, that's what I did, but. Asking for them to outline when they're taking PTO is more than reasonable. And then to say in the contract, hey, we'll pay you 6 months, because we're separating in an early termination, without cause. It's 6 months minus your accrued PTO. And I don't know why that's problematic language.
Right. That's what I would propose if the council wants.
It reduces the 6 months figure, but that's okay.
They still get 6
Still
months.
6 months.
Right.
Well, it's 6 months minus the PTO, it reduces the net. I mean, the net is lower,
Right.
assuming they haven't taken.
Right, if they take it, it shouldn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Right,
If we don't terminate, it shouldn't
Well,
matter.
there's that too, right?
Let's
But
hope
if they
we don't
take
have
the
to renew-
vacation and sick leave and this and that, that's what it's for.
Right.
mm-hmm.
I'm with you, I can follow you.
That's all I.
Okay. Anything else? Abe?
I actually have a problem with the advanced PTO. We're gonna give 80 hours in addition to 21 days.
No, they wouldn't get 21 days, that's just where they would start in the accrual process. So they wouldn't get, they're not getting 21 days on the front end, so if we look at our schedule. And in your
Personnel policy.
personnel policy, if your first 5 years, I believe you only earn 2 weeks vacation per year. In this case, they're starting in the 4th year of that calculation. So that way they would, in the 5th year, they would go to 21. So,
So the first month they would accrue 8 hours roughly.
Correct.
And then the second month they'd accrue another 8 hours.
correct. And so, but as seniority goes, as tenure goes, you longer you work somewhere, you tend to get more vacation. And then they're just starting a little higher in the tier. But they don't start with 21 days. They're gonna start earning in the 4th year, let me look it up.
But if we give them 80 hours,
But remember, they're coming in with nothing. And so you're trying to give them, maybe they have a vacation, a family trip, or I don't know what they have.
but they have an extra 80 hours still,
Yep.
correct? In addition to the 21 that they're gonna get accrued over the
No,
course of a
they-
year.
No. So let me look it up.
I couldn't find it.
Well, it's. The goal of it is think about the goal of it. So when somebody starts, they really have 0, right? And so somebody, you don't want them to have 0. So we need to refine it. I think that's what we're trying to accomplish.
You just-
PTO. I mean, that or they're taking unpaid leave and you're trying to get somebody in the door that is,
Does the policy allow them to go negative?
I've seen. Probably won't allow it, but cities do it. Employers
I mean,
do
I
it.
think that's pretty reasonable as an employer to say, if you're coming in and you've already got a week's of vacation planned, allow them to go 40 hours in a hole.
So. In 0 to 5 years, you can earn up to 168 hours of PTO. So every year you can earn 168 hours. Total, so that's 21 days. So in your 6th year, you can earn up to 25 days. So you're just jumping them ahead of the schedule. So they still have 2 more years to get to the top.
Yeah, I'm missing something, because then we're also giving them 80 hours, so it's actually 31 days of PTO the first.
No. Lucas, maybe I'm explaining it wrong.
I need to see the policy too, because here's the.
So.
I assume you still want to just cap it at 25 days, right, Eric?
Remember,
Yeah.
but they don't get 21 days on the front end.
Well, they
have-
accrue over the course of a
Right,
year, 21 days.
Right, so basically they get nothing on the front end.
Well, they're gonna get 10 days free plus 21 on the,
Correct.
on
Yep.
365th day, they got 31 days.
Well,
Yeah, that's a month.
again, that's not vacation time, that's sick and
PTO,
vacation, that's PTO. So you don't have to offer this, this is just trying to get somebody in the door.
I would propose to strike it altogether, and I would say that you could, we could have a sentence in there if we're concerned about bringing in someone in that already has planned vacation, to say we'll allow in the first year of, a week.
Would you be at all willing to
pre-accrued.
knock it down to 40 hours?
I don't know why we have to. I think 21's
You know,
very reasonable.
but they don't have any on the day one.
I don't think anyone in the private sector does.
Well, I don't know if that's true.
I'd like to find it.
I don't know if that's true. I don't think it's a kind of a. If you, it doesn't matter to me.
I'm okay with doing, like, we stated a negative award of it. But, or that can be approved, but, we
You're
need
gonna
to make
approve
sure that, that at least we're limiting or capping this thing so that it's not, we give out something in advance. And then we wind up with something afterwards. And then if we just got somebody that's banking it all, because we do want them to take it. You do want them to have a vacation that we're just not stuck with it in the end.
So you can.
Because 80 hours is like $5,600 plus per,
Yeah,
and or thereabouts or somewhere in that neighborhood. I'm not getting specific with it, but
yeah.
and if we go out to throwing in a month at the thing, we're close to $11,000 plus per. Again,
Well, so your cap and your PTO is 12 weeks, 480 hours. So that's the most they can accrue. It would take a while for somebody to accrue that. And that's assuming they don't ever take any days off. So, I mean, in terms of a payout, it would take a while for that to happen. But no, you can, this is just a point of conversation. There's no, this is up to you folks. What would it take to get somebody in the door?
My personal opinion is it's a very fair policy, and we're not. I don't think we need to put extra PTO on there in advance.
I agree.
Bless you.
Yes
So-
or no?
Eric, read again what our personnel policy states as far as,
So Ed, I don't know, is there I didn't get a link for this meeting. And could you resend it to me? Maybe I missed it. I
Want me to read
apologize.
the rule of PTO?
yeah, that's what, yeah.
Yeah.
PTO, you have it up?
Well, I have it up. I mean, I'd like to just put it up on the screen so you can see it. So PTO does not replace city observed holidays, jury duty, military leave, and court leave. Eligible employees accrue PTO based on length of service with the city regardless of any pay grade or position. PTO should not accrue during a period of unpaid leave of absence. The city's payroll system is the official record of PTO accruals. So they're 0 to 5 years, they will accrue 21 days a year. So 0 through 60 months, you accrue 21 days. Then it goes up from there, 6 to 10, 25 days, 11 to 15, 28 days. If you're an over 16-year employee, then it would be 31 days. Again, that's not vacation, it's sick and.
So Eric, what your proposed language and what your intent was to say that not that they would add an additional 80 hours of PTO, but they could use up to 80 hours of the 21 days that they in year zero.
That's different what that says.
Right,
Right, but that's the
Supposed to be
intent. I'm,
fair. No, that was not my intent. So
But that's the fair way, that's the way
Yes,
it works.
I'm
Okay,
fine
so
with
if
that.
that's how you want to,
Yeah.
but that was not my intent. My intent was to say, hey, you're showing up with some vacation time, banked vacation time. Get them in here, him or her, whatever, that you might have some plans this summer, you might have some events, some things. Just go do them. You're not gonna screw around and worry about screw.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
but we could still do that with the original, with the 21 days, right? Cause in year zero, they're accruing 21 days.
Right.
So we're just allowing them to use out of the gate, allowing them to use up to 80 hours before they accrue it.
Yes.
if that's the way you want to interpret, then I would clean that up and that's fine. That makes sense to me.
I think that's. our
Yeah, I'd be way
intent.
more on board with that.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
And then it's really just the accrual process doesn't happen until they get to the 80th hour. And
Right.
start
Right.
accruing.
correct.
What is the hours of operations here? When is the office open? Is it 8 hours a day?
Amy, could you tell us well, staff is here 40 hours.
Okay, I just thought of another thing I'd suggest changing is that where we say they can work from home 8 hours, where is that?
Yeah, it's in section 14.
Yeah, section 14. So can we say that it's expected that the employee shall be in the office when office hours are open? And that. Well,
The
we
first
careful
sentence
with that.
section, is that under
Right.
Does that
14?
do that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. It says the regular work schedule requires on-site attendance at City Hall
Yeah.
during normal working
I'm
hours.
sorry. Okay,
Yeah, there's always these bits and
It-
pieces.
I think
that
the-
you
I
kinda-
missed that.
The one sentence there talks about the remote is intended to be, hey, if you know, again, if you've got an appointment or something, you
Right.
need to work remote before that or after that or something like that to give you a little bit of flexibility in there for
Right,
that
can
piece.
we confirm that that highlighted sentence, like.
Well, I think you want.
Don't, you can't have Fridays off, you know, you can't have,
It says work remote. It doesn't say
Right.
you can get Fridays off. It says work remote.
right,
I think you also want to be careful though, that we're not chaining their feet to an office inside here 40 hours a week. They have places they also need to go. We just don't want it to be.
On city business.
Yeah,
If you have an exempt employee, there's those protections
Right.
for the city, for them.
Yep.
It tries to just give them a little bit of flexibility and
Mhm.
and yet. Know the normal working hours here. I mean, they're gonna be at your council meetings, they're gonna be at your planning commission meetings, they're gonna be at your vision committee meetings, all these things that might come forward. And guess what? That's time they're away from their family and they're gonna want to,
Mhm.
they're gonna
Okay.
stay.
leave it,
I'm-
leave it alone.
I think it addresses it in a fair way. It gives enough flexibility, but
Make
enough.
sure that we have
conditions.
that we have a pathway if there's abuse.
Mhm.
But I do say that to your previous point, Councilmember Markert, about keeping track of those hours, in the next sentence. Employees shall track remote hours and provide a listing of hours to the city upon request, so. I'm sure the city will want to ask from time to time for a report of those, and you can, if there's a problem with them, then you deal with it, but. It's not just. They're
Mhm.
gone and untrackable, so.
Okay,
I'm okay with all of that.
Okay. Anything else?
Can I swing all the way back to PTO? So to Bill's point, I think everyone that's an exempt employee still has to request PTO. And I think that we could have done a better job at tracking that. So I think we need to have something. If it's not in our policies to write in here, just like this one says, the employee shall track such remote hours. I think it's the employee shall track PTO hours.
So,
And
so
provide.
given a. Just trying to think, process wise, how do we do this, right? So we don't have an HRS system. Which,
It says the payroll system is the official record. of
which
PTO.
technically the payroll system is Banyan,
Banyan tracks PTO. It,
Right.
it tracks the accrual.
but does it have a request? Process? It doesn't,
It's-
right? So it just,
No.
so you as finance director would have to enter that in as, here's the PTO. And in my opinion, it's as simple as a calendar invite or something out to the council that says, I'm be on PTO at this time, and then now there's a record of it when it's happening.
And that,
But also let
we
us
just
know
have to
that
have something, so we
Right.
Person's
I
out
think
of the
that's-
office.
I think that's a something that probably better addressed in the personnel policy and not just for a one
I
specific, right?
agree.
So you always, what I would ask my employees is to request PTO, but then send me a calendar invite. So it's on my calendar. I know you're
So,
going, right?
so the challenge here. The city administrator is not going to be asking anybody for, and I'm not saying this is what you're asking.
No, no, no.
But let's just think through this, so city administrators, they're not gonna be asking anybody for permission to take PTO, they're using their professional discretion to say, okay. blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to have them fill out a time card or weekly accounting of that and give that to the city finance director is easy.
It's not, oh,
It's not that big a deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Just a-
well, we can do
I-
that. I
I've
mean,
been
either
doing
way.
it, You know, so it ain't a thing.
I agree.
It's, but what I would tell folks is, I would not use it as a minute by minute or hour by,
No.
or hour by hour accounting. It's just trying to,
If you went on vacation for the week, you just.
Yeah.
You know,
simple as that.
so the payroll system.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's all that.
that's all I'm looking
Yeah,
for.
and they should be doing that anyway, but we can put some language. in here,
Or if
please.
we just address it in our personnel policy, so that it covers all employees, I think would be the better place for it anyways.
Well, the other side of it is that at least then there's a notification that the person's out of office.
Oh, yeah.
And so that if something comes up and then it's known. that-
They should be doing
Well,
that just as a matter of professional.
Except that I hate out of office
I
replies.
understand that. No, it's not to say put an out of office reply.
to let
It's
you know.
basically
So
saying,
let the council know.
let the council know
Yeah.
or
Well,
let the
again,
mayor know or let.
those are things
Somebody
we-
else here know that,
Mhm.
hey, I am taking a day off or I'm using my PTO in some way.
I
So
would-
that if something does come up, say
They
there
should
is
be
an
doing that.
emergency,
Mhm.
it's known. It doesn't have to be known by any specific person on the council, but at least if there's somebody looking for the administrator, that they know that they're on.
Or if they have the typical city administrator OCD, they'll have their phone on them anyway and they'll answer. the
Right.
phone.
Mhm.
Right.
So it should be okay, but I think an expectation that hey, I'm gonna take a vacation next week, is more than reasonable. Or I'm gonna be out of the office, doing, is more than reasonable.
Yeah.
But that's something you also would be addressing through your, performance feedbacks and some of those things, and there's give and take there. They'll be putting in a lot of time and a lot of hours for you. Well outside the normal workday.
All right, anything else?
Last question, Eric. In your judgment, 6 months reasonable?
It's pretty standard.
It's not too great, it's not
Yep.
too.
Yep, pretty standard. I mean, they're taking a risk too. With.
Okay.
One of your candidates talked about moving, right? And so. You're buying, it's a tough thing.
Okay.
Pray for the best, hope when it goes, how's it go? Pray,
Get what you pay for.
yeah, do your best and,
I'm good, as long as you're comfortable.
yeah, it's
That's
pretty
normal.
standard.
All right.
It is, it gives everybody, because if it's 2 months, people might be glib about it, but if it's a year and a half, well, that's way too long, so
Mhm.
where are you at?
Yeah. Okay. So if we're comfortable with the changes and everything we talked about, Eric's got a little work to do on that, but I think generally he knows the direction. Let's talk about our candidates. So we've, just to catch everybody up. We had a process that we went through to interview, try to collect and interview a bunch of candidates. We failed to find that any of those candidates were acceptable, so we decided to restart the process, open the application again. We had two new ones, right? Four new. Yeah, 4 new ones. We whittled it down to 2 of the new applications, and we went back to one of the old ones and brought that one back up again. We had a small committee do a preliminary interview last week. That committee recommended 2 of the 3 that they interviewed come forward to this afternoon to the full council interview process. We interviewed both of those candidates this afternoon. We haven't discussed as a council any of our thoughts on that. I'm going to open that discussion now for if anybody has any thoughts or wants to kick us off in a direction on the 2 candidates that we talked to this afternoon. I think just out of the gate, I think we had 2 good candidates.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I think either one could do a good job for us. I'll let you guys throw out the next statements here if anybody wants to jump in.
Do you want to know the scores or how do we want to do this? I mean, I was happy with both of them and I scored one higher than the other, so.
Okay,
But
Maybe-
either one I think could do the job.
well, maybe just throw out what's your favorite.
Steve.
Okay,
Jelinski, I rated him on 96 points and I rated Martinson 84,
okay.
which were much higher than the ratings I gave a few weeks ago.
Mhm.
But I think they both could do the job. I just felt that Steve had a better interview
Mhm.
than the other gentleman.
You know, I pretty much came up, I came in here not really completely happy with either. Hoping for a better, hoping that there would be a good interview.
Mhm.
That might change my mind on it. And now I have a new problem. They're both basically tied. So, I did think that Stephen had a better, I would say the same thing. I think he had a better interview. They both have very, very similar experiences. You can, there was less experience on both of them that I would have really appreciated in the administrator position,
Mhm.
but they both had similar experiences. They had, sitting on both sides of the fence. I think one has, you could say that one had probably more public safety experience, but then the other one had a real strong background in also in law enforcement on the
Incarceration.
incarceration side. So there was.
Not that he was in jail.
No.
Well, he was in the jail,
Yeah.
but he was the person that was free to go home at night.
Yeah. So, but I also thought I went through.
Although maybe if he was in jail, it might have been good experience too. Huh?
Yeah, I did appreciate the feedback that we got from the group that met with them before us. I did look at the comments before that. I think if it came down to it, my preference would be to hire Steve. And that just coming out of the gate on it, I think he just did a little bit better. I think that in a couple of the questions that we asked in the interview that Anthony missed a couple opportunities to get a little deeper into some things, and he may not have had that experience or that thought process. I think he missed, if anybody had really looked at, where Credit River is. So if anybody had really
It's not way down. It was off, I swear to God.
Okay.
Without fail. I missed that about you.
Yeah, we're gonna miss that.
I'll kind of loom up on the screen.
Yeah.
kind of lost my train there, but where we were, where we were looking at in that interview, there were some specific things, and I think there were some opportunities that Anthony missed. In that they both would have studied, if they both really studied Credit River, it'd become very apparent in the last couple of years, some of the issues that are there. I think Stephen picked up on a couple of them. And I think Anthony missed them. He answered questions, but not, and to be specific, he answered questions, not really bringing up or mentioning the, I think it was the last one that we did. Look that up. Where we were, how would you help us create a long-term plan that balances growth, fiscal responsibility, and the preservation of natural spaces? I mean, that's a pretty good question about Credit River, and it really hits home to a lot of taxpayers here, a lot of people here, a lot of residents, and Stephen kind of picked up on it, but Anthony's answer was really just kind of, well, I'd set up a process to do it, and just kind of thinking about the development. It wasn't really hitting home to the question. It didn't understand the question. And so, with that, I kind of push more towards, I would push more towards Stephen also with that. In the interview, he did talk about, I found it interesting in his church position, where he dragged in, he went the extra mile to find money, available monies and income and everything else for the church. So, I don't look like Credit River is going to go out and rent out things or anything else, but he did find money that was available, and he knew about it, and I didn't quite get the same feeling out of Anthony. So that's what I've got.
Cool. Leroy, good thoughts.
Thus, the process we did it the second time around was much better than the first time.
I'll send you a bill.
Thank you. The candidates were better and I thought pretty equal also. So, probably lean towards Stephen.
Abe?
Yeah, I like Stephen. I don't know how long you want me to talk, so.
If there's any highlights, you don't
I
have
just
to,
think
but.
he would,
it
yeah,
does-
I think he would be a great face to the,
Mhm.
for the residents. I think he would be a very approachable. I think Anthony, may come across a little bit less. I don't know, I think Anthony was a great candidate. I think he had some great qualities. I think that would be a place where he would struggle a little bit more.
Mhm.
So, I also think he might try to bring in a little bit more structure than we need right now. Just hear a lot of, the bringing in a third party to help facilitate goals. That was a pretty big turnoff. And so I just feel like, let's work with what we are, and I thought Stephen would come in and do just that.
Sure. Again, as I said before, I think we had two really good candidates that both could do a great job for Credit River. I think Anthony's technical experience and what he's been through is a little bit better than Stephen's, a little more relatable. Planning and zoning, those types of things, which are very important. But I did find Stephen as a, personality wise and communication wise and skill level to be better than Tony's, and that's where I kind of lean that direction. I said, when you look at the paper, when we talked to him last week, I was thinking all weekend long that Tony was my guy, and it goes to show you, as we talked about before we did our remote interviews last week, that it's much better in person.
Yes.
You get a better complete picture, which is it's okay to do a remote one just to sort them people, and I'm glad we did, because the third candidate that we talked to would have been worth our time to have come, as fine person and everything, but I think it would have struggled. So I would agree with that. Stephen's probably our number one candidate, and the one that we should give it a run after. That being said, okay, if that's our intent, then let's the last piece of this then is, before we motion to approve this, is to talk about the blanks that are left in the agreement on the first paragraph, which were what's gonna be our salary offer.
Is he gonna come with a taser or not?
Why does that matter?
Might, you never
Why
know.
do you wanna get tased?
No, no,
That to hold you off or?
no.
I think I was able to zoom in on this and hopefully think it's worthwhile. This was really good, done by Councilmember Zanko. Oh, yeah. I'll certainly defer to him on what his work here was. I will zoom in even further.
Yeah.
Right?
Is it possible for you to send it to us, resend it? I know you sent it
Yeah.
out before.
Yeah.
Maybe you could just.
Yeah,
Quick
I
email.
can,
Well,
if you want me to run these through it real fast.
yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah,
Dave?
so the theory was going and looking at neighboring communities that were within our geographical area. That were also, so having two different I don't know, variables in there, size and the location. Right, as we had a 5, 10, 15, 20 mile radius. The question is, where do we fit in here? Are we just comparing ourselves to small, or are we comparing ourselves to those that are nearby? And we thought it would be a mixture of both. And as I started to go through here, if you look at the weighted average versus the weighted min and the weighted max, that's where we got to our weighted, our min was the 116, which was the average min. And then the max was that 145, which is small and medium within that range of distance. So that's kind of where we came to the range for this specific position. So, and I think that was kind of the thought process moving forward within in other positions, is taking an approach similar to this,
Mhm.
so that we could have a pretty good swap from both sides of those equations.
Mayor?
Yes.
I think-
Senator.
Well, both of the candidates, I think they have kind of a commuting distance at this point. And obviously to have this thing turn into have some longevity to it. I think it'd be desirable or ideal for the person who is our city administrator to live closer to the city at some point. So I think maybe we should think about how to be able to incentivize that possibly to bring them a little closer. Or consider it something in this offer that we have. And I don't know how to go about that or add that in or anything else, but or at least consider it in our offer.
I'm not sure that you can.
I wouldn't wanna screw it up.
No.
Yeah,
If he's willing to commute, then he's willing
Yeah.
to
Right.
commute.
yeah.
I like the fact that I wish he was closer.
Yeah.
But we have remote work policy. So. The
Yeah.
weather is bad.
Right, if the weather's bad, like Wednesday,
Yeah.
right, then,
Right.
okay, stay home, don't commute, don't waste your time on the road, waste your
Right.
time
We
on
don't
the
wanna be
phone.
an insurance bill.
Maybe let them know where the both of them are from.
Yeah, one candidate, the candidate that we're talking about, I kind of all seem to agree on is River Falls. The other one was New Richmond, Minnesota, so.
And he
both
said 35 minutes, right? That what he said, it took him today.
50,
Oh,
50, yeah, it's
like an
50, it's.
So you're looking at close. to
Both of
2
them are
hours
about,
both ways.
Mhm,
per
both of
day.
them are about 50 minutes,
yeah,
but so.
You know, I think as we think about an employee and you think about a drive time, right? It really becomes down to how much do I want the position and how much do I like the position and am I willing to do the drive time for it?
mhm.
Right? And I think as we start to think about a salary, we need to think about, you know, as someone is commuting a distance, how to make it an incentive enough to to make it and
Mhm.
to stay, because the last thing we want is someone to do it for 6 months and to say, wow, that's too
That's
much,
too
I
long,
can't do
yeah.
it, and then we're back
Or
at
an offer
square
comes
one.
along where they're being, it's closer to the.
Right.
to the driving at, they can.
Yeah,
subtract 2
well,
hours
and-
from the day.
And you don't want, what you don't want also is the next round of administrators that move on. And as it seems to cycle every year, what you don't want is the recruiters of the world reaching out to him and finding him and trying to lure him away either, right? So it's gotta be,
That's kind of why I just brought that up, at least to discuss it. I don't know how to apply it. I don't know if we should, but
I think
we need to be cognizant of it.
yeah, I think you apply that in.
It's 2 hours a
into-
day of driving.
You apply that into what the base salary. You'd say, here's the base
Right.
salary and this is, we're making a commitment, we expect you to make a commitment type of thing.
Some type of mileage maybe?
Well.
No, you can't comp on, you can't comp on mileage to and from your working location.
If we paid him the minimum, it'd be a 40% bump in what he's getting paid today. That is a pretty big incentive to take this job. So my question to Eric is it appropriate for the boss to have a lower salary than is reportable?
It's common to have that.
Yeah.
I think it's gotta be,
It's gotta be equivalent.
or more.
Well, so you do, I think, so Councilmember Zanto's work on the screen
Mhm.
followed the past policy you folks talked about, this past summer. If I'm not mistaken. About
Yeah, we used it
fine.
for the clerk and for the finance director.
The person's,
Mhm.
what their drive time is, what their skill sets are, you're trying to impute all those things and all those things have brought you to this point. So what is the market telling you? And that's the work that Councilmember Zanto did, that the market's saying this data. And that was the same market that you folks used when you hired the finance director and the city clerk, so. One challenge you'll face with some of that internal comparison is in the end with your prevailing wage. I'm sorry, your pay equity compliance reports in the future. So it's hard to begin to compare internally, whereas you don't want to compare internal roles, you want to compare city administrator to a city administrator. I get that the person would see a pay increase, but maybe they'll take less.
What's the one, it's 116 min and what's the midpoint?
130 would be the mid, right? So 116 and 145 would put 130 as
Yeah.
the mid.
Oh, the midpoint is 130.
Yeah,
So, and so that's probably within the ballpark of what
agreed.
Councilmember.
So could we do my suggestion 125, because midpoint to me is you've been in this job for 5 years and you've been a good employee in that, and I don't know if he's been in the city administrator role for 5 years, so maybe something a little less than midpoint.
Well, you're, again, it's up to you folks, whatever you.
Well, that's my thought,
Right.
that's why.
Yeah, so you're, again, falling back to your policies, this is what you developed,
Mhm.
what you're harkening back to at least a little bit is increasing your wage, the more experience you have beyond the rate of inflation. And that's not what you folks wanted to do last summer. You wanted to go away from that parameter altogether, where it's just, what is the market force for this position, and it's X. And if you're gonna take that job, you should be paid X. Yeah, there's gonna be some nuances.
So I shouldn't look at midpoint as being like we're gonna bring everyone in at midpoint then, is that what we're saying?
I don't think that's what you're saying. You're saying because your last 2 hires, you looked at this data.
Yeah.
And said, this is what the market is.
I would throw in there that with both of them, they may have had a certain less than 5 years as a city administrator on their resume, but they had a lot of equivalent experience.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't put them at a minimum person either. I think we're hiring the ability, and if that's the case, we shouldn't be hiring either one of these guys.
Right.
Because, that's saying that they're not good enough.
I was proposing the difference between the midpoint and the mid of the minimum and midpoint.
Yeah, you know, personally, I think, you know, where were we at with the last administrator?
130.
130.
I honestly, and that's what I thought.
Yeah,
I honestly think we ought to stay there. I don't think we ought to cheapen this. Besides, the person that we're gonna offer this to has got 2 hours of gasoline per day to keep thinking about coming here. If we sit here and cheapen this thing down, he would be looking for the first opportunity to pay him more.
Leroy.
I think they do have the experience because they sat on this side of it for
Yeah.
a while.
Both of them.
Both of them.
And planning and zoning and being the clerk and,
Mhm.
you know, the budget guy and, you know, all this, they know how the wheels turn, so.
Mhm. I'd be comfortable at 130.
Yeah, I would too.
I think for all the reasons that we covered, you know, recruiting, retention, skill level, experiences. Okay. Any other comments, questions, or otherwise, I'm ready for somebody to make a motion.
I'll make a
And that's
motion.
the resolution, by the way, is 2025-11.
I'll make a motion to make an offer to Stephen with resolution, whatever it was, -11.
2025-11
With the changes that were noted earlier.
in the contract.
And I would strike the last bolded second option. On the,
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Second.
Perfect, all right. So I've got a motion by Zonto, second by Soderbach to authorize the interim city administrator and city attorney to develop and finalize and have an executed employment agreement with candidate Stephen, sorry,
Jelinski,
Jelinski?
Divine Delinsky, or Jelinski.
Yes,
Hopefully
for the position of city administrator at the rates and terms consistent with the 130,000 that we discussed here tonight. I get that right?
sounds good to me.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. All right, Eric, do you have everything you need
Sure.
to execute that forward?
There.
That's simple, right? What could go wrong?
I'll probably hassle guys, just some clarification, but I think it'll be fine.
All right, cool. Well, let's go on to something way less controversial and talk about County Ditch 4.
Yeah.
Easy for you to say.
By the way, Eric, thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah,
I
it
wish
was
we would have
great.
used you.
Yeah,
No, don't be careful. We might have to pay him.
Yeah.
you guys have been great. I appreciate that, again, this is all, it is what it is, but this isn't easy, and I appreciate everybody giving me feedback and working through it, and Peter and Cheryl and them participating. It's been, had a lot of meetings and a lot of talking,
Mhm.
so, and a lot of emails, so.
I do.
Will you
appreciate-
unshare your screen?
I do appreciate the comments that we got back.
Easy on the mute now.
Yeah, don't mute, just unshare your screen.
Yeah, no, I was glad those came out. Those were great. Thank you, Amy, too, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Amy
Lucas.
participated, Lucas,
Yeah.
100%.
Anyway, so thank you, Mayor and Council, again for the County Ditch 4 matter. In your packet, there's a map of, that shows, a parcel and then a squiggly parcel. Those are two parcels owned by the city. I believe it's not by easement, you own those outright. Can't tell you how the city ultimately came about acquiring them, but they are part of the ditch 4 layout, if not the actual Credit River in some parts. So the county is looking to potentially perform some maintenance, or maybe even divest themselves of the ditch. And I can understand both ways of it, and certainly there's a maintenance cost, which will not be small in one sense. But maybe they're wondering what their benefit is, considering its history from the early 1900s in stormwater management, what have you. In their letters dated February 11th, they're saying to the city, look, if we're gonna do some reconfiguration and redetermination of benefits, you're probably gonna have an exposure in the neighborhood of $6,000 on this maintenance. And I would tell you that if they walked away from this and the city had to do that maintenance, to bring in a contractor to do this stuff from time to time, it would be hard to do it for $6,000. It just is. Just to mobilize anything is kind of a dog and get that work done. So, you know, from one perspective, the concept for the city as a landowner is to say, look, we had no problem with you doing this redetermination of benefits. We want you to make sure you keep it, maintain it, and keep it in good order. You're gonna get down trees, you're gonna get beaver dams, you're gonna get all these things that could cause some localized flooding to the budding property owners. All that said, my understanding is there's non-abutting property owners that are also gonna be potentially assessed for these costs. Now, those non-abutting property owners are not facing really the same project costs. I mean, to be fair, they're not the ones gonna be impacted by no maintenance. What is the county's position to assess them costs and what are the determination of benefits? I can't tell you what that legal rationale is. All I can tell you is that if you folks are responsible to do this maintenance, it's gonna cost you far more than $6,000. So that's it in a nutshell. And so they're asking you, do you want to, in their letter, approve the abandonment of ditch 4? And from one perspective, I would argue that, you know, you won't be able to maintain your abutting properties for $6,000.
If we have to.
If you have,
Well, trust me, our section of it's wooded and.
And flat.
And flat
Very flat.
and, yeah.
I would throw in that I could show you pictures of a town highway that was completely obliterated just a few weeks ago in northern Wisconsin by a couple of beavers. And that should we have, you know, if this isn't maintained, the other problem is wood that's and debris that washes into it, plugging a culvert for a bridge. You know, just along the side. So if we don't do that, then we wind up having, you know, 150 or 500 year rain, which, you know, those things are possible, very possible. We could actually lose, we could lose a bridge or a road or a culvert, just from that, not, you know, barring any other rodents, but, we should be really careful with that. I think that if we allow that out and take it over ourselves, then we need to really consider that we're taking over the responsibility of it. Right now, it's theirs.
So I think, I'm trying to remember the timeline of this, but it was, when did they hold that public hearing at Spring Lake Township?
May
It
of
was
2 years ago.
2 years ago, right? Right, and then
For September.
I think at that same time, we received a similar letter. We've sent comments back to the county. We had Shane, and I see Shane's on in case we have any technical questions, but we had sent comments at the time requesting that the county do not abandon ditch 4 because of, if you look at the neighborhoods in Credit River that were all designed for their stormwater drains to ditch 4, and it's become more of an area benefit than it is the abutting properties, right? So if you have, you know, water from Gray Fox coming down the hill to ditch 4, and then somebody along the line there doesn't maintain their section, that backs up. Pretty soon we have water coming up onto Meadowview Boulevard over here. And who are they gonna ask? Who's gonna get the phone calls? But the city will, right? So it'll land on us.
Bill will, because his culvert's plugged up.
I'd fix that myself.
Yeah,
know.
yeah. But that's I think was our fear and our position that we took when this first came around. I believe since then, they have since surveyed all the property owners that are the current benefiting property owners who did not get the required amount to abandon it. But this letter feels like,
They didn't? I thought they did.
no, I don't
get
think
enough to abandon.
if they did, I'm
The
sure they
math
would
doesn't
have.
work in the present. Did you look at the presentation?
I didn't see
Okay.
it, no. But it feels like
Funky math.
it feels like they didn't get the right number, and here now they're asking again because they didn't get
Right.
the result they wanted. And
I wanted to ask the attorney if this is even legal. We are interpreting your non-response as a vote for doing something. When is that ever the case? If you don't vote, that means you're against it,
Depends on.
unless you affirmatively say you're for it.
I'll generally say there are situations under statute where it depends on the wording of the statute.
Okay. I found that funny. I don't mind doing this. I always question the $250,000 to determine the, how can that be? We have the maps. We have
It seems like a lot, doesn't
I can
it?
do that on GIS, can't we?
Yeah, GIS,
Yeah.
right? Somebody needs to look at the, turn on the contours, right?
Yeah.
If it was only that easy to
Yeah.
do. But yeah, I would, the other piece of it is, you know, today's determination of benefits that the current properties are not just in the city of Crater River. They extend down into in Newmarket Township. So it would be really tough if the city was to say, okay, we'll take over the management of this because it extends outside our boundaries.
Correct.
The county is really the only, you know, instrument of government that has authority over the land in between the benefiting properties that would be able to have some sort of assessment or some sort of regular collection for these. I personally believe that's where it fits, and in my mind, I think we should I would propose that we, you know, send this back with our comment letter again. You know, stating why we don't believe it should be abandoned.
I think the other side of it too is you look at this and that also goes through a fair amount of undeveloped properties as well, you know, which eventually may develop or may change, you know, and that could be, maybe it could be looked at upon at that time, right?
Shane, I see you turned your camera on and unmuted your microphone, huh? Did you have any comments on this?
Mr. Mayor, my only comment is that, you know, somebody has to maintain it. And so I would support sending the letter again. You know, as to the costs that are identified in that letter, I don't know how they came up with them or whether or not they're accurate. But it would be kind of going a step backwards if we went from having an entity that's set up for maintaining this right now, and then went to abandoning the ditch, and all of a sudden there's nobody responsible for maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
So I would support, you know, sending the county that same letter that we sent them last time.
Aren't they asking you though to complete the form? It looks like we didn't complete the form, did we?
I don't know if there's a form here to
Yeah,
complete it, unless we want,
Check the box.
that says we want to abandon, that would say
Oh,
we would approve the abandonment if we check the box. So basically what they're saying is if you want to hold an opinion of you'd like to abandon it, check the box and return it.
Yeah.
I would propose that we have, you know, our city engineer pull back out our comment letter that we sent the last time and have our administrator mail that back to the county along with this, you know, and just our note saying that we don't support abandonment.
Should we also send that to the people that were asked to sign a petition? Just so.
I don't know that we have that list of,
Maybe we should
property
request
owners.
it from Scott County, who did they send it to? So that at least they're copied so that they understand it, because if they may not know. The reasons behind any of this. Might sound like a great idea to abandon it, but they don't have to worry about it.
right up until it's a problem.
Right up until the first time you have to do something with it.
Ted, if you don't mind stepping to the podium, I'll let you,
It's on, right?
that's on. Yep.
Go ahead,
It's green, it's good.
Ted Kowalski, Spring Lake Township, we've been going through this too and giving feedback to the county. We have ditch 13 along Highway 13 that goes through Lydia. And we just rezoned some of that, and all the comments and criticism we got from all the people in that area saying, hey, that ditch is important, that ditch doesn't work right. Well, it already doesn't work right and they want to abandon it now. And when they talk about a reassessment of or reapportionment of benefit,
Yeah.
that redetermination. Well, if you think of when those ditches were taken over by the county, they were a lot bigger parcels and a lot fewer residential homes on them. the problem with having the homeowners be responsible for the maintenance, could you imagine trying to get somebody to clear the trees out of the ditch that's in their yard? They're gonna say, it ain't causing me any problem. The problem's a mile back. How are you, so the guy on the mile back says, well, I'll take it out of there. I'll go up there and take out that tree. Well, how are you getting on that guy's property? I don't understand the rationale from the county on this whatsoever. If you need to do figure out the value, how far out does it go? Maybe that's why the number gets kind of big at 250, because they're gonna actually engineer where's the water flowing from and how much is feeding into the ditch. Because it probably goes a lot further than they even had the first time.
Well, it's a watershed.
Well, yeah, I don't know if they did it but now they got a
Yeah.
lot more properties in there.
And that's the problem, right? Is that the determination that's currently goes back to the early 1900s, right?
Completely
It's-
different now.
Yeah, 100%.
So we said, no, don't abandon it. We
Yeah.
didn't think it was a good idea. That's
Yep.
my 2 cents.
Thank you, Ted. Any other comment, council? Otherwise, you know what, if you guys would so make a motion, we can approve that to have our staff send the appropriate comment back again to the county.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Leroy.
I'd like to amend it.
Okay, Jay?
I think we should really request from the county who's getting, the mail list of who's getting this thing. And make sure that they are copied, because they were asked by the county to make a decision on this, and at least our explanation would better educate them.
So you'd want us to do a physical mailing then
I
to
think
them?
so. Yeah.
We don't know how many people that is.
We don't.
We just post something on our website saying, hey,
Yeah.
look.
Or at least we need to disseminate this information. We can't just send a letter and say, hey, it's between us and the county, because the county's made it public.
Give
And
it our
there's
best
a-
effort to notify them on the website and mail and whatever.
And maybe throw it in the
Newsletter.
Is that coming up?
okay.
Yeah,
All
there we
right,
go.
so
Yeah.
I guess I can yeah, just as long as staff is doing something with it.
Yep,
All
okay.
right, I'll second it then without adding it.
All right, so I've got a motion and a second to approve having staff reply back to this to Scott County with do you have something else there, Abe?
No,
Oh. With reply back to our original comments of why we believe that this should not be abandoned. And then we'll deal with how we post that later. So anyways, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Let's move on to CSTS rate updates. Eric,
Well, actually.
are you gonna pass that over to,
Our finance
let's try
director.
to find, oh, there we go.
No problem.
Oh, but you
Yeah,
had
thank
your
you.
name on it.
I know, he's smarter than me, so you.
Just a more of an informational piece here, and in the next meeting, we'll get more into it. Just initial budgets, rates, and a tool has been prepared to go over in the next meeting for discussions for the 4 CSTS areas. So I'll put together some information for the packet for that, and just plan for some additional time next meeting to go through each of those, and some feedback to be shared and revisions to be made. And I believe there's timelines, maybe we're mentioned here, some very preliminary timelines. After we go through that, we'll set up the public hearings for each of the 4 areas, and then hopefully rates go live July 1st is the initial plan right now.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Lucas. All right, move on to the next one. Eric, are you gonna handle this one?
I sure, why not? Well,
Well, again, it's got your name, it's got your name on it still, so.
Thank you, Mayor. At your last meeting, the city clerk brought forth some social media policies related to the general purpose, and then some public noticing requirements of how we would post those things. We had a conversation about adding some language or some capacity for the city clerk to put some more timely notices about upcoming meetings, like say, hey, this morning she would have put a notice post on Facebook, hey, council's meeting tonight, or maybe the morning of the planning commission meeting tonight. I had expressed a concern that, we want people to be engaged and know when meetings are, but on the flip side, we can't necessarily always burdened with doing those things and causing a false expectation. In bad faith, of course. So what we came up with was the language in your packet on page 50 in grayscale. That simply states, as time may permit, city staff may add additional links to its social media accounts regarding upcoming city meeting dates and times as may be outlined on the city's established website, other required venues, but will not elaborate as to meeting content on social media. And the goal of that is, so, hey, there's plenty of other reasons, places about what is on those agendas. Or some point in the future, somebody might want the city to highlight certain actions on the part of the council about topic X or topic Y, whereas staff are apolitical in those things, and our goal is simply to say, hey, there is a meeting. And go to this site and look at that agenda. And so that's what we came up with. Hopefully that works, and I would certainly defer to the city clerk as well, so.
A comment. Should we also have in that policy that, just an explanation that is not an official posting? Or notification?
We could do that too.
I think just
You're comfortable.
just a disclaimer into the thing that would just say, and this will not be considered an official city posting or whatever.
Notification.
Yeah,
Publication.
that I think. that would just
Well,
protect-
it's not legal to be right now.
Correct. It hasn't been. So
Although
that would just keep.
There's
it-
a bill moving that might fix that.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Amy, do you have any additional comments? I know Eric was tossing it your way in case you had anything there. Hold that button down.
Comments, I
Okay.
think that we addressed, the problem that it might have to cause people to be dependent on Facebook when they should be looking other places. But,
Yep. All
I
right.
think that we could even do a pin post, with the disclaimer on it at the top.
Perfect. I think this more just guides staff into operations, and I think it gives them leeway to, post of some of, official and items of interest, but interest of the community, but keeps it to a minimum. So cool. Anybody have any other questions, comments on that? Otherwise, I'd be happy to take a motion to approve that.
I'll make a motion with the change of adding a disclaimer to that. As discussed.
Pin post, yep.
I'll second it.
Motion is second to approve the social media policy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Next up, sanitary sewer update inquiry and county data. So we talked a little bit last month about, and we approved getting some info from some current updated pricing from the engineer regarding, reaching out to our legislative people on some potential bonding stuff and planning for that in the future. Through that, we also talked a little bit about, trying to coordinate some, what does the current landscape look like? Are there any other options besides serving some neighborhoods with sewer and water? So staff, Eric and I and Shane met with some people at County Environmental just to kind of scope that out a little bit. I'd like us to have our engineer and the county come to us probably in April and, talk that through. And, I think they got some really interesting data that, not only should the council hear it, but the residents should hear about the status of some of those and some of the problems that exist there today that probably some of it I wasn't even aware of that existed and some of the things that have gone on, certainly even in the last year of where it's, some of our resident had to have a septic put in that couldn't fit within any of the setbacks or anything, and what that costs that home and what's going to be an ongoing problem for that home. But anyways, I guess that's the point is I'd like to have, have staff work with our engineer and Scott County staff to try to get an update in April if you guys are willing.
Totally for it.
I think it's great. Can we make sure that the people that come and present are experts at the different types of septic systems?
That was the plan.
And the other thing I'd like to ask is, I saw a map where it's, green and yellow and red. I think it's really important to also say it might be red. However, there's an alternate site on there. So I think we need to also be looking at those locations that have alternate sites versus don't have alternate sites, which could cause a problem. For example, if my septic goes bad because it's getting old, I'll just find a different location on my property. It's not a big deal. However, there's certain ones that do have the problem where they don't have a site. So I think being able to see that would be good too.
You should have one on your.
Plat.
I do, correct.
It is.
But
Right,
there's
right.
other ones.
So
As the
Abe
county
lives on,
comes-
Abe's on a 2.5 acre lot as opposed to what we're talking
2.5
more
acre.
about. We're more talking about, this would be more items up in the northwestern quadrant where it is half acres or less size lots, right?
Right.
That, and I think even Shane talked about, even devising some exhibits that show, here's that quarter acre or third acre or half acre lot, and here's how much space of that a type 1 system would need to take up,
It's
right?
determination between water supply
Mhm.
and drain field and everything else and how they fit into the thing. And that's where I think.
Perfect. All right.
I'm sorry to comment on this, but however, I don't know if that's something that is possible at that meeting to have that particular capacity. I don't know if that's your desire as a whole. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, it's
But
somewhat of
that-
a survey
a
for
lot
each
of-
one of those lots.
There'd be no way to really kind of parse that data out without really getting to looking at each individual lot and knowing the dimensions, where the well is, where the septic is, and what's left. Maybe is the intent, Mayor, maybe just say, okay, here's the age of these septic systems and their colors, whatever. And these lots are generally small. Dear expert from the county, what is your general concept of them being able to replace it, given the known parameter? I mean, having them just give some general feedback, because until you really get into looking at each individual site, you just might not know. So I don't know if there's.
Yeah, I don't think we need to, I think, yeah, you're right, Eric, that looking at each individual lot would be more work and more of the scope than what we're asking for this particular thing. But I think you can look at some of the information from this presentation and make some general determinations, because you look at some of the surrounding lot sizes and at least if we have, an exhibit that shows, hey, on the average size lot in this particular neighborhood, here's what kind of sizing we're talking about and the lack of space.
Yeah, in all of those neighborhoods, in all of the neighborhoods that are there in the northern part, there are varying lot sizes through there. And it's not necessarily there's a problem throughout the entire thing. There's a specific problem on a couple that maybe have a cul-de-sac and a back-to-back with some other, just certain sections or a center core of those neighborhoods that actually have a problem, or where the lots were smaller, garage is built, drain field has already been compromised, and they added a mound system, and now that's shot. I mean, you can drive through a couple of them, and you'll see the mounds sitting out near the street fronts and in the front yards. There's a lot of that, and that's actually what we really should be trying to figure out. Because maybe not all of those neighborhoods actually truly need full service of water and sewer either. It may just be a section of it, and maybe we can, look at that a little bit. It's like
You're
just
not
an
gonna run a
example.
pipe, you're not gonna
No,
run
I
past the
understand that.
house to get the one
I
that's
understand
back
that, but
there,
if you
and
take a look at Country
it's-
Court, there are, by the land area of that, it's maybe only a third of it that even has a problem. It's Sewell Circle and the surrounding properties that back up to that. For the most part, the rest of them don't really have an issue. I mean, I have almost 2 acres there in that same thing. So and there are a lot of places that have plenty of room to put another system. So my point is, I don't know that we have to go out and sewer the entire neighborhood either. Maybe we can take a look at these things and figure out how to get a section of it. And couple that with some other surrounding development or something, you know, to build it out that way. It could be cheaper.
You're right.
We, we're doing some ditch cleaning in Casey's Addition on 7, 8 years ago. 2 homeowners come running out and said, hey, how deep are you digging? My septic is right here
Mhm.
in their front yard. Oh, maybe like, get it checked out a little better, huh? So, you know, it's just stuff like this that pops up and it's amazing.
Mhm.
So when I talked to, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I just want to make sure that we give a
Comprehensive look.
Yeah.
representation of what the
Mhm.
real issue is, because if you start going on the east side of Texas, right, and you've got these lots outside of Creekwood,
Mhm.
we don't have that. But if we
Right.
have
Yeah.
reds in there because they're 25 years old, that doesn't necessarily mean that's a problem that the
Mm.
city has to solve, the city.
Exactly.
water
Right.
sewer.
Again, I think we're only talking about the neighborhoods that we know that the lots are a problem.
I agree, but
We
I just
don't,
wanna-
we aren't talking about extension anywhere outside of those pieces right now, and I think that's where the presentation would focus on lot sizes of the ones that are small lot.
And that's all I wanna do is make sure
Mhm.
that that's what we gear that to, cause when I see a map of all the Christmas lights and it's,
Yeah.
and it's red in areas that aren't
Yeah,
the
I don't think
smaller
we're worried about
lots,
that one.
that's very, it's telling a different story than I think we need. to be
But,
telling.
you know,
Yeah, I
that
think we need to
also-
focus on that northwest quadrant is really what we need to
Also,
focus on,
also.
because that
with
tells a
those
big story.
red Dots. That's not necessarily an undoable situation. It may be a non-conforming system that's in there.
No, the red dot ones meant that was,
failed.
yes, they
Okay.
know,
So
know
then-
the
okay, the
absolute.
yellow.
The one I'm referencing was just
Older
an
than 30.
age, not failing, it was their
Right.
age.
Right.
The yellows were
Yes.
more than
30 years old.
more than 20 or 30 or whatever their number is, but the reds, they knew. That when we talked to the reds
Is that what it
were,
was?
Yeah, you guys got it right.
Okay.
You had a countywide map, or
Citywide.
top citywide
Yeah, yeah.
map, and they're just dropping dots and.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure that we're correctly telling the story and we're not creating
A monster.
yeah,
Mhm.
right, a chicken little hair where the sky's falling. Well, for a lot of the homeowners that aren't in those areas, that's not a concern. Yes, it's going to be a problem when you gotta fix your septic and
oh yeah,
a well.
Or
but
when your
that's something
well
that's
ages
different.
out and you've
Right.
got to put in a new well.
But that's different than what we're talking about in this situation, I think.
all right.
Is this part of the meeting or a workshop? And secondly, are we gonna allow citizens that come if they have a question for the panel? Whether we want to allow them to ask them?
So it'd be part of the meeting, it'd be a presentation during the meeting. My proposal, my hope would be is that this is just for council. Let's start there and then let's do some neighborhood specific meetings to follow. So we can start, addressing a little bit more in detail.
Okay.
Some people, and then we can spend time talking with questions and that. Let's start with getting the council up to speed and understanding it first, and then let's work on scheduling out some more neighborhood specific
Okay.
meetings. That would be my proposal.
Yeah, and I think if we could time it right, it would be great to have in the flow. Cause that's another topic that could have a lot of interest in shooting.
Yeah. Well, we'll set our date and Amy can publish it and then we're stuck with it.
Yep.
At least it's named appropriate.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Okay.
All right, perfect. Sound good? Cool. All right. Last item on general business was 3.4 removed from consent. Last council meeting, we talked about the the compensation, the council compensation for when we spend an entire day on something. My proposal is to amend the ordinance to say that council members are compensated $50 an hour for meetings spent that exceed 4 hours in duration. The action before us was to procedurally post this 10 days before it would be considered for possible adoption. So we're not adopting this tonight. The action would be whether we post it or not 10 days prior to our next meeting.
Okay. I pulled it because I'm not in favor of posting it nor doing it. I wouldn't post it because I don't want to do it. We get paid $5,000 a year, which is $100 at $50 an hour. which is averages out to be about 8 hours and 20 minutes a month. That's what our salary is, and then we get $80 a meeting. I think the 8 hours a month that we get paid on under salary covers situations in that case. We don't hire a city administrator every year. So I don't think it's necessary. I did take a look at, I took a look at a couple other cities and how they address that in their salary administration ordinance for city council, and none of them do what we're proposing to do. So I'm not in favor of it. And that's why I wanted to pull it to have an individual vote instead of a consent vote.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that too. I think that, you know, when we changed our salary back in 22. That was a very easy way to show that the council is very serious about being fiscally responsible, and I think that we're going back now and changing that. If we were gonna make a change, what I'd propose is rather than 5,000, make it 7,000, get the per diem out of there, it gets all the administrative hassle of putting hours in there. And
I like that.
yes, it would be an extra $80 per council member for the year. But I'm just in opposition of $50 per hour for a meeting like that.
Thoughts?
No.
No? Thoughts?
Good like his idea.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we change our salary administration to do what Abe just said. 7,000 a year. No per diem, meeting, no meeting per diem, so we don't have to constantly send every 2 weeks the form that sometimes I forget, maybe others forget.
Yeah, it's just a huge hassle.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that as well. That would be an acceptable way to handle this. So I think instead, let's change the posting of the ordinance to state that, so then we'll take that up at our next council meeting.
Just write what Abe said.
I would just write what Abe said, and that'll be fine.
If my math was right.
That's right, perfect.
If my math was right, it's 69.20 is what it would be at $80 per meeting. So make it 7 would just be a little easier.
Inflation.
Yeah.
All right. So that's a motion, Abe?
Yeah, I'll make that
And
motion.
you're seconding it, Bill?
I'll second.
Or wait, I think you made the motion. Bill
Yeah,
made the
I'll
motion.
second it.
Bill made the motion, Abe second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Staff and council member updates. I'll go around the horn, starting with Claire. Anything? Hold the button down. Hold the button down. Here you go.
Councilmember, Mayor and council members, most of my updates were in Eric's weekly notes from Friday, but just there's quite a bit of development applications that are gonna be on the March agenda for planning commission that pending tabling or not, will come to council in the April 7th meeting, I think is the first Monday. As well as others that, you know, it's springtime, people are ready, we're getting lots of applications, so just anticipate those on planning commission agendas and council agendas, and we'll keep you in the loop in the weekly notes.
Thank you, thank you. Eric? Nothing? Abe?
No.
Leroy?
Weight restrictions probably
Yes.
coming up here. We also have dust coating to consider. Rock hauling onto the gravel roads and grading, so. Just
Did I see the grader on Murphy? Or that
Yes.
road the other day, last week?
Mhm.
Were they,
trying to?
That's where I figured it's frosty though.
Oh,
Or
wasn't
wet.
bad.
No?
Really got in the park, there's frost.
Oh, I bet. Okay.
Well, I actually just kind of tie back in on the weight restrictions in Country Court. We kind of have a nuisance property owner that is currently hauling on weekends considerable amount of tree waste into the property with 4-axle trucks with raised axles. So it's really driving on 3 axles. Those trucks far exceed the 15 tons that the road is rated at and posted at currently without even jumping into that. And then we're also burning waste, tree waste. And, you know, there's this morning I drove by and there's a giant pile 25 feet in diameter and 15 feet high. That's set up for the next burn. There's no snow cover anymore. I mean, we should really be thinking about that because we just spent a lot of money on the streets. Just, and it's, part of the reason that we did that, I think, was because the trucks are grinding it up. They're not exempt.
Does he have a burning permit from the fire department?
Don't know.
Be good one for the deputy to check out, I guess.
I think what we need to do is determine whether or not that would be considered an ag use of that property, because that property is an ag use property, and if he's having commercial vehicles come in and dump and haul and do stuff, that may not, that sounds more like a business operation in a residential area rather than a ag use. So I think that's more where we need to determine if there's a zoning violation or not. That would be the easiest way to deal with the situation.
Well, the other thing is it really a permitted, dumping place either?
No.
Or.
That's part
You
of-
got that, Eric?
Because he's
Okay.
processing firewood.
All right.
And some other
Hey,
things.
pay him a visit, find out what's going on.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right, the only update, real quickly, that I want, just one coming through, legislature, it could be interesting. We talked about public notices before. There's a bill going through to fix the, whether we're legally required to post in a newspaper or not. And, it actually has some traction to it. There is some opposition to it, however, there's some certain, groups that are opposing a change. Like, you can only imagine. Follow the money. It's not hard to figure out who benefits from having to post in a newspaper. The newspaper lobby is pushing it back against it. So at any rate, that would be a really helpful thing for a lot of cities and a lot of municipalities if it didn't have to post in the newspaper. Call your legislators, write them email, tell them you support this change so that we can stop having to post in a newspaper. All
Or
right,
especially in a newspaper that nobody reads it.
yeah, thanks. 100%. Well, again, I use the example of the city of Prior Lake. They have to post in the Star Tribune because they don't have any other posting. And there's only 200 in a city of 30,000 people. There's only 200 subscribers to the Star Tribune in the city of Prior Lake. So how effective is that other than keeping that newspaper alive? That's it. So, all right, that's all I got. Jay? Bill, anything?
Vision meeting is tomorrow at 6 here. And then, does anyone know if there was a fire in the Credit River Cemetery last week?
They were defrosting the ground.
Oh, for the burial net.
Yeah.
Because my wife said there was smoke
Yeah.
coming out of the hole and I'm going, I don't know
Yeah,
what's
the
going on.
deputy called me and
They went right to hell, Bill.
That's crazy. You're gonna-
Nobody I know.
All right, oh my goodness.
anything, Lucas? Nothing new? Joe, nothing?
No fire jokes about me.
Perfect. Anything? Perfect. Abe?
All right, I'd like to make the motion to adjourn, please.
I'll second.
All right, motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Dad. David, you want? Use some mouse. Use the mouse.
Yeah, and